The year is 1995, and a little-known hockey team playing in an aging, somewhat decrepit arena in Miami of all places is about to embark on what would forever be known as the Year of the Rat. When eventual team captain Scott Mellanby sent a locker room rat to splatter into a bloody mess with a rather nasty slap shot, and then scored 2 goals in the game that followed, a legend was born. The team would go on a semi-miraculous run to the Stanley Cup Finals, only to fall short to a much better prepared Colorado Avalanche team in 4 games, including an epic triple overtime game with Colorado scoring the game's only goal early in the third overtime to avoid the teams likely playing 2 complete games that night. It was Colorado's first year after a move from Quebec the season before. Oddly enough, Colorado won that cup with former Canadiens goalie Patrick Roy, who had previously won with Montreal, the last Canadian team to win hockey's biggest prize. But most NHL fans are familiar with that story, especially now that the Panthers are the 2-time defending champs. But not everyone knows what the catalyst was for the team's sudden demise after that Cinderella run, and what started the almost 25 years of futility that followed. Today, we fill in that gap for you.
I don't keep a lot of memorabilia, but this is kind of a neat piece. It'll always be part of our journey, my journey. You gotta be remembered for something, and I guess this is my place in history. You got the drywall here that Scott Tinkler, our trainer, circled with a Sharpie. Some really faded blood stains now, but that is blood. That's rat blood. 95, 96. That will be always remembered as the year of the rat in South Florida for sure.
As the 1995-96 NHL season finished up its final months, one team in particular was struggling somewhat mightily, the Florida Panthers. After a blazing hot start of 31-14-5, the team spent the rest of the season in practical freefall, going 10-18-5 the rest of the way, while giving up 4 or more goals in 11 of their final 33 games, which by any measure is really bad. Still, because of that incredibly hot start, the Panthers found themselves in the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. Since this was only the team's 3rd year in existence, and because they had played so poorly for months at this point, not much was expected from the team when they matched up against the Boston Bruins in the first round. The Bruins had made the playoffs every year since 67-68, including 23 years since they had last won a Stanley Cup. Surely this squad was no match for an expansion team that had played the last few months of the season at what would amount to be a 65-point pace in today's NHL. The Panthers were clearly overmatched. Maybe they'll get lucky and win a game. What chance does this team of misfits and gritty heart and soul players have against the experience and star power of one of the original 6 NHL teams? Well, about that. So that happened. Turns out it was the Bruins who were lucky to win a game, grabbing Game 4 when the Panthers relaxed a little bit after jumping out to a 3-0 series lead. Interestingly enough, the Bruins would go on to finish in last place the following season and miss the playoffs, which is exactly what happened to the Bruins this last NHL year after losing to the Panthers in the playoffs again. History, as they say, repeats itself. Next up for this team of misfits and their rat-throwing fans were the Philadelphia Flyers, who had won the Atlantic with a goal differential of 74. Led by Eric Lindros and John LeClair, with almost 100 goals combined between the two, this matchup seemed to be the one that would likely end any hopes the Panthers had of continuing their run. But then Florida shut out the Flyers in Game 1, and after a couple of close losses in Games 2 and 3, The Panthers would win Game 4 in overtime and Game 5 in double overtime to gain the upper hand, and then closed out the Legion of Doom in Game 6 to move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Cinderella effect was on full display. South Florida had embraced the team with games selling out and sales of plastic rats through the roof.
Rats raining in Miami.
Here come the Rats at Miami Arena.
Wild scene. Seen roughly 500 plastic rats hitting the ice.
This is sponsored. Can you believe this? This is sponsored. The picking up of the rats is sponsored. I love it.
By the orchid people, right?
Yes.
Gotta love it.
Rats, plastic rats, and plenty of them. It all started when Scott Mellanby one-timed a rat that had gotten into the Panthers locker room before the 95-96 season opener. Now, of course, we don't have footage of that, but luckily, we do have this very realistic reenactment.
Outside the arena before games, you could find everyday people selling black plastic vermin out of their trunks for $5 a piece or 5 for $20. As we know, the league would eventually change the rule to no longer allow rats to be thrown on the ice after each goal. But credit to the NHL for allowing it to continue throughout the entire season and postseason. Now things were serious. The Eastern Conference Finals. Talk radio was full of new bandwagon fans just jumping on and learning about the sport. A drive down I-95 found Florida Panthers signs everywhere, and anywhere you went, the conversation turned to something like, "Hey, did you see how the Panthers are doing?" Not just that, but South Florida was desperate for a championship. The Heat had never won at this point, and the Marlins would not win until the following year. And the Dolphins hadn't won a championship in almost 25 years, even way back then. So when I say everyone was enamored with the possibility of a South Florida championship, I mean everyone. But first, the Pittsburgh Penguins. No problem, right? So what if these guys named Lemieux and Yager had 131 combined goals? So what if the team had collective 11 hat tricks in just one season? Now a closer look at the Pens roster showed that they were actually very top-heavy with mediocre goaltending, and one key piece missing from that aforementioned top-heavy top three in Ron Francis. Francis had broken a bone in his foot earlier in the playoffs and was done for the year. If the Panthers could contain Lemieux and Yager and score a few goals on Barrasso and Reggett, who both had goals against well over 3, well, maybe this team could continue its magical run. And that's exactly what happened. The Panthers scored 5 goals each in games 1 and 3 to take a 2-1 series lead. Pittsburgh clamped down in games 4 and 5, allowing only 1 goal, but the Cats scored 7 combined goals in games 6 and 7 to win the series. In the end, Lemieux and Yager combined for 2 total goals in the series, each guy scoring in the Penguins' Game 2 win, and then remaining scoreless the rest of the way. While it wasn't a total domination, and many NHL fans feel that a Penguins-Avs Stanley Cup Final would have made for a better series, that's why they play the games. Pittsburgh had ample opportunity to get rid of the pesky Panthers and simply could not do it. So that left us with an Avalanche-Panthers Stanley Cup Final that in many ways was close until it wasn't. The Panthers had leads in games 1 and 3 but couldn't hold, and the Avs scored 4 in the first period of Game 2 en route to an 8-1 shellacking. Even though the series ended in a sweep, Game 4 was an all-time NHL classic, with Uwe Krupp scoring early in the third overtime to seal the deal with a 1-0 victory. The Panthers had certainly given everything they had and come up short. Nothing to be ashamed of and everything to be proud of. The future still looked bright for this team. They had proven they could play with the big boys of the NHL, and considering the likelihood of bringing back most of the same roster, the 1996 season began with some serious expectations for the team entering its 4th season. And to start that season, those expectations were met, to say the least. The Panthers jumped out to another quick start and were comfortably in first place. Everything seemed to be lining up for the team to build on its success from the previous year and maybe come back and finish the job, much in the same way the modern version of the Panthers lost badly to Vegas and then came back the following year and redeemed themselves. The team was rolling, fans were happy, and the future looked bright. Except, not so much to everyone. One man was not convinced by the Panthers' success, and unfortunately, that man was general manager Brian Murray. Despite having eliminated 3 of the biggest and baddest teams in the NHL the previous year, and despite being on top of the current standings, Murray became unsure that his team had what it took to win consistently. So, on November 19th of 1996, Murray took action, making a move that without a doubt was the catalyst for the incoming 20-plus years of ineptitude from the franchise as a whole, and one that changed the locker room of the proud team that considered themselves a family at the worst possible moment. If you look at the 95-96 Panthers and see who was in the top 10 in points that season, 2 names are going to stick out. Not because of anything that they did specifically that year, but for what would happen to them the following season. GM Brian Murray insisted that the team needed to get bigger and stronger in order to compete. So he pulled the trigger on the trade that most of the fans and some members of the team took as a massive slap in the face. Murray traded fan favorites Stu Barnes and Jason Wooley for a little-known, unproven prospect by the name of Chris Wells, a 6'6" center who was playing for Cleveland of the IHL in the Penguins organization.
What an amazing play by Stu Barnes. Stu Barnes, he too making his first appearance in National Hockey League playoffs, has been the hottest player for the Florida Panthers in the last week since he's come back from his injury.
Fan reaction ranged from perplexed to outrage. South Florida talk show personality Neil Rogers said it best when he said, "Chris Wells can't skate." If you were a newer hockey fan in South Florida, you trusted Neil's opinion more than anyone in sports broadcasting in the area because he was the only one who had really grown up watching hockey and he knew the game inside and out. Although his show was not exactly sports talk, he would graciously answer the same questions over and over again from callers. What is icing? What is offsides? And of course, trying to explain that stupid toe in the crease rule. If Neil said Wells can't skate, well then the guy can't skate and that was that. Brian Murray himself said Wells was a development project, so why they traded 2 viable NHL players from a team that just won the Eastern Conference Championship for a project center is a question that no one who knows hockey has really ever been able to answer. Now, at the time of the trade, the Panthers were in first place, and then, perhaps motivated out of anger or frustration, or maybe just fear of being the next to be traded, the team won 4 straight and at that point led the NHL in points. Then the wheels fell off. The Cats were 15-3-5 after the 4-game win streak, and then went 20-25-14 the rest of the way, finished in 3rd place, and after shutting out the Rangers in Game 1 of their playoff series, the Rangers would win the next 4, and the Panthers would not win another playoff game until 2012, and wouldn't win another series until 2022. So how exactly did the trade affect the locker room? Well, a couple of years ago, I asked Panthers legend Billy Lindsay that question, and here's what he had to say.
If you asked us when did it all fall apart, when did it all go wrong, was when Stu Barnes and Jason Wooley were extradited for Chris Wells. And our feeling was the chemistry of that team with taking out especially Stu Barnes. It just seemed like you guys were number 1 in the NHL at that point. And then it kind of, it wasn't like you guys got bad or anything, but for the fans, our perspective is that was the moment that why would we do that? What happened there? So I'm just curious as to what was going on in the dressing room for you guys in that moment, because Stu Barnes had to be one of those Ryan Lomberg type popular guys.
Yeah, well, Stu, I played junior hockey with him. I knew him really well, but he was a big part of that team. And you talk about bringing players in, but as far as chemistry, taking players out hurts more. Yeah, that hurt us individually, because we had built something in '96 and we were off to that start in '97. We were league and rolling and think, okay, well, we're building off what we did in 96. Maybe we have a chance here in 97. And honestly, that gutted our dressing room. There was a ripple effect through it. And Brian Murray, the GM at the time, he just felt that because we were so good out of the gate and had older players that we weren't really developing as an expansion team underneath, some of our players, and felt that his thought process was that we needed to get younger and start developing. And I believe he took an opportunity away from us. I have a lot of respect for Brian. He treated me really well, but it's if you look back on that trade, I'm sure it's one of those trades you probably wouldn't do again. But that trade really gutted us in the dress. Yeah. It hurt because it becomes part of the family. Yeah. And we know, and we all know it's a business and that you got to move on. But the family, he was part of our family and a big part of it.
So what happened to these three players post-trade? Well, Panther fans, you might want to put your hands over your ears for this one. From the date of the trade, Stu Barnes played another 843 games with 187 goals and 241 assists. Jason Wooley played another 592 games with 57 goals and 205 assists, while both ended up playing not just in Pittsburgh, but together in Buffalo as well. Chris Wells, however, went on to play 141 games with a whopping 7 goals and 18 assists. He never played for another NHL team other than the Panthers, and played a little bit internationally before retiring in 2005. Meanwhile, the Panthers slowly disbanded over the following several years. The team did acquire the Russian Rocket and Pavel Bure in a trade that saw another fan favorite in Ed Jovanovski leave, and a year later Scott Mellanby was traded to the Blues to just about complete the dismantling of that Eastern Conference Championship team, with Billy Lindsay following the next year. The team never sniffed anything close to success until the recent version of the Panthers came into focus. To give a picture of just how bad the actual team was, in 2001, starting goalie Roberto Luongo had a .920 save percentage and a 2.44 goals against average, and still finished 12-24-7. The fan base that had just started to grow quickly dissipated until all that was left were fans that knew hockey before the Panthers and those who fell in love with the game enough to become diehards. It was such a disastrous, poorly timed trade that the negative effects were felt much further than just on the ice. The team would become the butt of attendance jokes for decades, to the point that even today there are fans uneducated enough to still throw out the old 6 fans trope, despite the team being 5th in average attendance last year. For years, the very mention of Barnes and Wooley for Wells was enough to send even the most casual Panther fan into an eye roll at best and a profanity-laced rant at worst. In the almost 30 years since the trade, I've yet to find one person who even liked it when it happened. And in all honesty, looking back at it now, it almost seems like a Saturday Night Live skit of a GM who wanted to ruin his team. Even without knowing the future potential of all three players, trading 2 important contributing pieces of a conference championship team for a project player while in the middle of an unexpected cup window is downright stupid. It's just plain dumb. This move had nothing to do with any salary cap or any locker room cancer. It was simply one of the biggest unforced errors you will find in the modern day hockey landscape. Unless, of course, you want to talk about the Panthers trading Roberto Luongo for Todd Bertuzzi, who would go on to play an incredible 7 games and score 1 whole goal with the Panthers. But I suppose that is a story for another day.